So, for example, in the beginning of my career, when I started in this industry, the biggest pushback was on pricing. People couldn't wrap their head around paying thousands of dollars for a PowerPoint, which is funny because I mean, when someone says, "How am I going to pay $10,000 for a PowerPoint file?" You think, have you ever heard anyone say that for a TV commercial? Like, how can I pay hundreds of thousands for an MP4 file? Like, it's not the file format, it's what it brings to your organization.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. I'm Boris, the host of this show, let's call it. And today I have another colleague of ours from the industry who also runs a presentation agency from Spain, though. His company works with big brands and startups and helps them with their presentations and helps them make their presentations more impactful. Just to name some brands in there, their clients include Audi, Louis Vuitton, let me be very careful here, Louis Vuitton, Uber, and many, many more. What's more, he is also going to be one of our speakers at the upcoming Present to Succeed conference in April 2022. So, who do we have today with me? We have Damon Nofar, right? It's pronounced Nofar, correct?
Correct.
Yes, I'm correct, obviously. And he is the founder of presentation agency Slides. Or do you call it Slides Agency? Or is it just Slides?
Slides agency, yeah.
Slide Agency. Damien, welcome, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So Damon, you know how this goes. Every single guest that we have, we ask them how did they end up in the presentation industry. Tell us your story. What happened there?
Yeah, so I actually have a marketing background. So when I graduated from university, I got a job as a trainee at a big education firm. And that was really the dream job for me because I thought I wanted a global career, traveling the world, learning new languages and such. And many people don't know this, but about 7 months into the job, I got fired.
Okay.
Basically, my boss called me in and he said, "Damon, I can see you're quite miserable here. This doesn't seem like a good fit for you. So here's 2 months' pay. You don't need to come back." And let's hope my parents don't watch this because they didn't know that probably. But basically, the good news from that learning is that I quickly learned that working for someone else, trying to realize their dream, was not really my passion unless I really loved the company. So during this time, I had the opportunity to go back to Sweden and I started taking some courses in graphic design, marketing psychology, and just stuff that I found interesting. And it was in one of those courses, I think it was the graphic design course, where the professor had just amazing slides. His slides was, you can imagine this, pitch black, one line, minimal line of text, subtle animations, and it just blew my mind because up to this point, everything I've seen had been these white, bright slides filled with bullet points and squeezed in images wherever they could fit. So I was just amazed by how this looked. So I remember after one of the classes, I went up to him and I said, "Excuse me, professor," whose name I forgot. What software are you using? Because to me, this had to be Premiere Pro, Photoshop, whatever.
Everything but not PowerPoint, right?
Exactly. And he went this and he pressed escape on his computer, on his laptop, and just showed the PowerPoint in all its glory. And I was like, how is that even possible? Are you allowed to use slides like that?
Okay.
And it was in that moment I started exploring slide design, just playing with it, having fun with it. And during that time, I think this was in 2013, one of those evenings I was bored at home and I created a deck called 8 Tips for Better Presentations. And I
Mhm.
uploaded it to SlideShare. I don't know if you're familiar of SlideShare, but it later got acquired
Of
by
course.
LinkedIn.
Yep.
Today it's not a huge platform, but back then it was the best for content
Big.
marketing.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
And basically that little deck, which was 30, 40 slides, just went viral. And I got tens of thousands of views, hundreds of thousands of views after a few weeks or months. And people started reaching out saying, "Damon, we need your services." Companies from Australia, America, just all types of companies from every industry asked for my services. And you could imagine my response. Services? What do you need help with? Like I hadn't earned a single dollar online, and now they
Yeah,
wanted my services. So that's basically how I started, and it's just I've been doing it since, really.
very, very interesting. SlideShare obviously was very big for you back then in the years. Cool stuff. Let's talk a little bit about a topic that you have a very specific opinion about, and it's about the role of presentations in the world of marketing. I think that you have a very interesting opinion that people who are listening, because they are business people, right? These are business professionals, would be curious to hear. What do you mean when, like, why are we differentiating presentations and marketing? Like, what's going on there? What's your opinion on the topic of presentations, and then everything else but presentations in the context of marketing?
Yeah, so I'm definitely fascinated by this topic, especially since I'm a marketer by training. And it's fascinating to see how presentations got the back seat when it comes to marketing. That's something every professional should know how to do. It's not something we spend much money on, at least in the past. And it's just
Mhm.
funny because looking at the thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on marketing and the results it gets compared to a sales pitch or an investor pitch, is just staggering how this, what do you say, misallocation of budget has happened. So if we compare presentations to marketing, the biggest difference I see really is that when it comes to presentations, you really usually, I should say, you usually have one shot to succeed. So when we talk about sales pitches, investor pitches, conference keynotes, I mean, if you do a bad job in presenting your idea, there's really no second chance there. You're not coming back to amend your pitch. Whereas if you do a bad digital marketing campaign or outdoor marketing campaign and maybe the results are not as satisfying as you wanted, you can always run it again. You can tweak, you do some A/B testing and you tweak it and you run it again. And that's really what fascinates me, that you can't do that with presentations, but still people don't get the importance of it. So one thing that comes to mind, for example, if you're a professor at a university, you can afford doing bad presentations to your students because they have to come every day. They don't really have an option. Whereas if you're a student looking for a job, for example, you really need to nail your presentation. If you don't, you might not get the job you're looking for.
Yep.
Um, so really, I think that's what many companies are realizing today, and that's why our industry is really booming, especially even though I should say, even though after the pandemic and everything, it's just we've seen a rise in requests for our services, and this really because companies are realizing that the return on investment on good presentations is just out of this world. I mean, if you do a good presentation, whether that's in sales or internal or whatever, the response you get from your audience is just so much more worth it if you do a good job at it.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And by the way, a friend of ours who runs another presentation agency in Amsterdam, Mr. President, he was actually Paul, who was also on the podcast last year, was one of our speakers at the event. He actually has this idea that maybe big business. Okay, no, let's not just say the big organizations out there, but people and organizations out there should have a separate budget. You know, like imagine a world, right? In the same way as you have for for social media, for advertising, for, let's say, I don't know, billboards or whatever, like any type of budget. Why are many organizations, or should I say most, if not all organizations out there, not having a separate presentation budget? That's a very intriguing idea. The first time when I heard him saying this, I was like, that really is a good question. In the same way as you mentioning that the return on investment on a single presentation is just,
And
you cannot even compare it.
exactly, and given the role of presentations in companies and the fact that we do it
Mm.
so often, much more often than that big PR campaign or marketing campaign. I mean, this is a daily thing we do, especially
Yeah.
in sales. It is astonishing that they don't have separate or specific roles for that. But if you reach out to companies like, I've done it myself, if you reach out to companies like Airbnb or Nike or whatever, they usually have a dedicated presentation specialist because they've understood the role of decks
Yeah.
and the importance of it.
Yeah, and strangely enough, the companies that realize the importance of it are always the most successful ones. What a
Coincidence.
coincidence. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about what are the biggest mistakes that you see people doing in their presentations and in their slides. Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, mistakes, we can talk about this for a full podcast episode if you want, but the biggest one I should say, and let's see if you agree, is probably people trying to use one presentation for different purposes.
All right.
I take your laughter as an agreement, or you know at
Yeah.
least what
Oh,
I'm talking.
yeah. I would say that that's in the top three for sure.
Right. And that's something we see on a weekly basis when we get leads. I mean, the first question we ask is obviously, what's the purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? And the response most usually is, so I want to pitch this to a live audience. I want to be able to send it out as a PDF. I want to be able to upload it to the website to stand on its own. Okay. And I said, so you need 3 presentations. You don't need one, right? No, no, no. We need one. And that's really the biggest mistake. And it's very simple because the purpose is different. A live pitch in front of an audience, the purpose of that is to inspire. It's not to give all the details. It's really to inspire, to get people to lean in, to ask for more. Whereas the purpose of a send out document, a PDF, is really to give more information, like a brochure. So when you say you try to fill all those purposes, which I get because you don't want to spend lots of money on separate docs, you try to kill, what do you say, kill 2 flies in one. At least in
Yeah.
Swedish you say that, um, but really you're doing yourself a disservice when you try to use one document to fill different purposes. It really becomes an average document across the board rather than uh, optimized for that particular purpose. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, of course. Like, I think that everyone that's listening or watching this, depending on how they're consuming this episode, will agree that, especially in the corporate world, but not only, you would see one presentation that's being both presented and sent over email afterwards. Because the normal question after a meeting in the corporate world sounds like, so you're going to send the presentation, right? That's in one way or the other, your audience will always ask you that. And that's why people just send whatever they're presenting with. And I think that the worst part here is that they're not even presenting with slides. They have the document, right? The document version of the presentation ready to be sent. That is great, but they're actually presenting with it and not with something that are super simple, clean slides, which are not repeating you, kind of.
Right.
But yeah,
I mean, if you
it's
can
on the
send
way.
out your presentation afterwards, then it's really not a presentation, it's a document. Because if people can
Yeah.
understand it without you, then that
Why
says
are
a
you
lot.
there?
Yeah.
Yeah, yesterday I was talking with a very big brand, and we were having a training with some of their salespeople, and I'm like, you guys have a presentation that, if you look at it carefully, is self-sufficient. We don't need you to understand the product and the services that you are offering if you're sending me this file. However, when you're presenting it, it's so like it is self-sufficient. Why do I need you now? I can understand everything by myself. And what's more, I'll do it faster than if you are presenting it to me. So we have to rethink this, like it needs to be rethought in a way. Yeah. Any other mistake that you're seeing except for this one? Anything else?
Um, Probably if we talk specific about how people use their presentation softwares and such, I think the fact that people don't make good use of templates is a big mistake, especially if you're a big corporation, which is another thing. I mean, I see that as well on a daily basis. We work just like yourself with many Fortune 500 companies. And I mean, these are companies that have 5,000, 10,000 employees who use
Yeah.
presentations daily. And you look at their template, which is the first thing I do, because I'm always interested to see how do these corporates develop their templates.
Yeah.
And it's just wild how bad they are, how not user friendly. And
Yeah.
this is something, I mean, if you put that into perspective, that 5K people are using this template on a daily basis, imagine the amount of time and money you would save if that was properly developed. So for example, the other week, one of my big clients who recently had a big rebranding project after an acquisition, they sent me their template because they needed some help, and I just had a quick look. And obviously, this template was developed by their partner agency, which is not specialized in PowerPoint. And usually, these creative agencies, I mean, they hate PowerPoint, to be honest. They don't want to work in it
Yep.
because
Yep.
they find it hard. They find it whatever. It's not Photoshop, essentially.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
what they
Well said.
do is they create the presentation in Illustrator and then try to convert it to PowerPoint, and it just becomes wacky. Like it had a big logo in the top left corner, which just looked crazy. It was interfering with the title, and I'm like, this makes no sense whatsoever. And I know that this company is going to use this template for years to come until someone just
Yeah.
says we need something new. So that's another thing. The templates are not used well.
Yeah. And by the way, if people are listening to this one, maybe you're not in the position to change the template yourself, but at least you are in the position to say, hey, whoever is responsible for this, we need to rethink it, because a presentation template, as you're saying, I think my explanation for this, like for the templates themselves, is that they have to serve the presenter, you know. And if I always push people to ask themselves, hey, your corporate template or the template that you have for your organization, is it helping you? Like, is it of help? And I'm completely shocked that most of the times people are like, actually no, it's preventing me to do things, or it's not helping me because whatever elements are put this way and I cannot figure out a way how to navigate this, and I'm always, wow. And that is most of the times, I mean 99.9% of the conversation is like that, which is telling you how broken this is.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this one and you're not the person that requested it, right, you're not the PR, the branding, or the marketing manager, or whoever is responsible in your organization, then go and talk to them and tell them, hey, let's talk with this marketing agency that did our branding, because most of the times, I think, is it the same for you that most of the times the branding organization, the organization that comes up with the brand, with the everything around the brand, is also responsible to create the template?
They're definitely involved in it and they have a lot of opinion in it for sure. We've done templates for some big companies, and honestly, it's been a real struggle to try to align with the branding because it seems like they have another vision of what a good template is, which is not aligned with how presentations are used really. So, for example, having a big logo on every slide is not going to serve you. That's not how you get brand awareness. That's how you get distraction, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
Yeah. So what is the cost then? Like, what is the cost of because we were talking, like, I have some notes here on the right hand side of me on the other screen. What is the cost of a presentation? Like, having in mind all of the issues that, and the two, I would say, major problems that you see, I would completely agree. They're on the market every single day. Probably somewhere right now, these things are happening. What is the cost of that? Like, if you don't fix it, what's happening?
Yeah, so talking about pricing and cost is definitely interesting because I feel like that's definitely something that hasn't been communicated well, which I'm partly responsible for being in this industry. I should definitely put out more content trying to explain our value. So, for example, in the beginning of my career, when I started in this industry, the biggest pushback was on pricing. People couldn't
Mm,
wrap their head around paying thousands of dollars for a PowerPoint,
yep.
which is funny because I mean, when someone says, "How am I going to pay $10,000 for a PowerPoint file?" You think, have you ever heard anyone say that for a TV commercial? Like, how can I pay hundreds of thousands for an MP4 file? Like, it's not the file format, it's what it brings to your organization. And I think I get it at part because PowerPoint has never been in focus or a big part of the graphic design industry. So I can
Yeah.
understand the objection. But when we talk about cost of good presentation, we should really put it into relation to cost of bad presentations. Let me explain. So imagine I'm going to help a company with a sales pitch, let's say it's 20 slides, and I'm going to charge them 10, 15K to develop the design. Let's say the story
Yeah.
is already quite okay. And at first glance, someone might say 15K for 15 slides. Are you nuts? That's $1,000 per slide. That doesn't make sense, Damon. Okay, then I would argue what's the cost of that presentation if delivered in a bad way? Well, it's the cost of lost opportunity. If they go and pitch a company and that business is worth 300,000 to that company and they lose that pitch, the cost of that pitch just was 300,000. So put that into relation with the 15K or 10K, and then we can discuss if this is worth the money or not. I'm not saying all presentations should be priced at this, but you should put it into relation to understand the cost of a good versus bad presentation.
Yeah.
And I will be the first one to tell a company that they don't need our services. So I would never recommend a small company, a local business who's pitching for 2K, 3K business a month to pay several thousand for a presentation. That's not a smart investment. Go buy
Yeah.
an off the shelf template for 20 bucks and just change the colors to your branding and you're good to go. Um,
Yeah.
Thankfully, many companies are understanding the importance and they know the difference between daily briefings in house compared to high stakes presentations worth millions of dollars. And they understand where they should spend their money. So I think the good news is that in this industry, we have everything from premium high end agencies like yourself and mine, and we have people who deliver presentations in 24 hours. So there is an option for everyone. And I think you just need to do your research and trying to find what's best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot agree more with what you're saying about the deals and putting everything into perspective. I have personally declined and advised so many people that are just starting their organizations, just starting their businesses to spend money with us. I'm like, guys, you don't have that much money. That is not a wise investment. Like, if I'm on your place right now, and I have been in your place in some years ago, I would never spend thousands of euros for a presentation in this moment. I'm like, exactly as you're saying, go to Canva, go to pitch.com, go to Beautiful AI, go to Envato, go to some website where you can buy a $10, $15 template, buy 5 of them, you know, choose one at the end, and it's still so much cheaper, you know. And the crazy part, by the way, I think you let me know if you agree. The crazy part is that the level of the presentations out there globally, not just here, let's say in Sofia or in Spain somewhere, like I think that the level is just so low, and the expectations of the audience are like the level of the presentations that people deliver is just very, very low. And everyone that does that much, you know, like just a very little, just improves just a little, immediately differentiates from everyone. So everyone that just buys a template for 15 bucks, you know, at the end ends up differentiating from everyone else. Not to mention what ends up happening when you work with an agency like you, or like Slides or us or anyone else in the industry. Like it's a completely different ball game now.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the fact that 99% or 95% of presentations are really, really crappy, that
Yeah,
fact just states that if you just do a tiny improvement, just like you said, if you just shorten your bullets so they're more concise, if you make your message a bit more clear, if you just learn how to structure your slides a little bit better, you're already in the top 30. Now,
yeah,
there are some people who really need to go that extra edge because they're raising millions of dollars for their business, or they're pitching Spotify for a partnership. In that case, you might need to do that little extra to make sure that design, story, delivery, everything is aligned perfectly.
yeah. You just need to make sure that every detail is taken care of. That is,
Yeah.
and as you start, like you started with this, some of those presentations you don't have a second shot in them. I remember like when we were doing an IPO here in Sofia, like there was a guy, because the presentation went and became the second biggest IPO in the history here in Bulgaria. Yet I found like a lot of places where it could have been better,
Yeah.
because of so many factors. And there was a person that I was talking to, and I remember him saying, "Yeah, you do it the next time. It will be better the next time." And I'm like, in some things there is no next time. Like there is no second try, there is no second chance here. So it's already late, but thankfully it was enough,
Yeah.
to make it successful. But there is no second
That's the
chances. That's something.
perfectionist in you that's doubting you, but that we need to push that back as well.
Yeah, maybe from time to time, at least, maybe. All right. So what else is happening? Like, what do you else see that could be better in the world of presentations from the business perspective? Like, do you see people spending a lot of time crafting the stories of their talks? Like, what's happening there? Do you see? Because in my opinion, I always, every single time when I get into a conversation with somebody, they always show me already slides, and I'm like, wait, let's let's go step backward. Like, let's talk a little bit more about who the audience is, what do you want to achieve. And most of the times they don't even know what they want to achieve. They
Right.
Most of the times I hear an answer that sounds like, well, we just want to tell them about our product. I'm like, that's not how it should be. That's not exactly a goal. So let's try to figure out, what do you want to achieve, right? So what do you see? Do you see people spending enough time on building and crafting the stories of their talk, or not that much?
I would say that we need to speak, even though it feels like everybody's talking about storytelling. It's just everyone
Hmm.
is dropping the word all around business. It's such a buzzword. When it comes to presentations, it definitely needs some work, and people need to understand the essence of storytelling and what it really means. Just like the example you said, you might think that your story is telling about the features of your product, but depending on who you're presenting to, that story will look different. And many people don't understand this. So, my personal belief is that the reason many people struggle with storytelling, it's because there's a disconnection between what you want to say and what your audience cares about. So if your audience can't relate to what you're saying as a presenter, there's really no story to be heard. I mean, the story is just in your head. And that's what people often, what do you say, misunderstand. So, for example, let me tell you an example. Some years ago, we worked with a company called Luggage Hero. It's a Danish startup with a very simple idea. They basically partner up with local shops and cafeterias, and they say, do you have some extra space in your shop? And they say, yeah, we have a room in the back that we're not using. Okay, so what if we put travelers luggage in that room and you get some extra revenue? Brilliant idea, very simple, but how do you communicate that to your audience? Because no one really cares about luggage storage. It's not something we walk around thinking about. We just think about it when we need it. So basically, we went back to the drawing board with the team, with the Luggage Hero team, and we said, okay, let's try to think about, what do the people who use our service care about? Well, they care about enjoying every second of their trip. They care about freedom, not having to pull around their luggage around the city, and all of these things. And that's when it hit us, that that's the message we should communicate. We shouldn't communicate about luggages. We should communicate about, do the best out of your trip business. We should communicate, make the most out of your time when you visit a new city, and so forth. So, for example, in one of the marketing campaigns, we had images of couples hugging and jumping on tourist spots. And we would put a text there saying, try doing this with luggage in your hands. And it just clicked. People got it. People could relate to that. Oh, yeah, running around with luggages, going to an Airbnb. I've been there, I've done that.
Mm.
So, when you get that connection where people relate to your message and they nod their head, you generate trust. I mean, you already know that half of the work is done. What you say next will just be so much easier, to inspire the audience for action. I actually read something the other day that was summed this up brilliantly. It basically said, um, people hear statistics, but they feel stories. And that's the whole idea. We want the statistics, the hard data that satisfy the left side, but we want the stories, we want the visual part, the creative part that stimulates the right side. And when you activate those both sides of the brain, that's when the magic happens. That's when you know that you will inspire for action and get people um, inspired.
Mm. And then before we wrap this episode, we wanted to talk a little bit about the future of this otherwise very niched industry because it's not large industry, I would say, but a niched industry still. It exists and it's becoming bigger and bigger, even though I would argue that it needs to become bigger faster because there is such a like the potential of it is just so like so large, so big. Just one presentation can change everything for you. I'll digress here because I can talk about that problem all day long. What about the future? Like, what do you think will happen in the next few years? Having in mind that Facebook is announcing, Microsoft is talking about metaverses and everything else. Like, what's on top of your head there?
Yeah, I think the future is very interesting for sure. I mean, we've already seen how the business has changed since the last few years with everything going remote and hybrid mixed models. So it's definitely more pressure as a presenter to deliver your idea, knowing that your audience is just one mouse click away from distractions. Um, and speaking of metaverse, as you bring up, I mean, don't ask me too much about metaverse because it's quite early and I probably don't have the answer. But if we take the most basic idea of metaverse, which is augmented reality, virtual reality, and all of these things that, for example, Mark Zuckerberg demonstrated in his Meta announcement. I mean, that again leaves a lot of doors open to try to figure out how can you stand out as a presenter, right? This whole static monologue from one way to the audience is just going to change. It puts so much pressure on you as a presenter to try to find more creative, interactive ways to engage with your audience, right? So, for example, if we speak about the current state with virtual and how people present virtually, I know you have a lot of opinion about that as well, because I've seen your team push out lots of content on how to present online. Every time I think of something, you guys publish it.
All right.
But how do you create interesting presentations online? So, for example, I think using polls is a great example of how you can engage more with your audience, and it's become much more easy now going virtual because when you're presenting to a big room of audience and everybody's sitting there on their phones or whatever, it's quite hard to organize. Hey, pull up your phone and choose your answer to this little question I have on the slide. Whereas now people are in front of their computers at their homes or wherever. It's much more easier to engage with them with polls, and I think Slido is doing a great job there. Didn't they just get acquired by
Yeah,
Salesforce?
Cisco.
Cisco.
Cisco
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
purchased them. Yeah, a few months ago, by the way.
yeah, yeah. That was just amazing because I followed these guys
Yeah,
for a while, and it just stunning how good of a work they're doing.
yeah. I would say that also amazed me. By the way, I'm with very in a very close relationship with one of the guys at Slido. He didn't mention anything. Obviously, there is a reason why he would not mention anything before the deal happened. But when it happened, I was like, "Whoa, that is a bold move by Cisco and a clever one for sure."
Yeah,
That one I can tell you because these guys and the Slido team are just, yeah, they're very good in what they do. Let's just put it there.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just put it there. All right. So there was before we go and just wrap it up and ask you where people can find more about what you guys are doing. There was more like you probably know or you may have heard, but even if you didn't, now you hear it. We always ask who else we should get on the podcast. You know, like that one name, that one person that's coming from either the business world or from the presentation space. You know, in a way, however, you can relate and every single time their name pops up in your head every single time when you hear a presentation or successful presentations. Do you have anyone right now on top of your mind?
Oh,
Just one person though.
just one person when it comes to presentations.
Somehow related. It doesn't really matter how, you know?
So I think one guy who is an expert in storytelling and strategic storytelling, especially in business. Do you know Andy Raskin?
No,
Great,
but I'll
because
write it down.
then you will have a fascinating conversation with him. I follow this guy on LinkedIn for many years. He's called Andy Raskin, Raskin. So look him
Okay.
up. He has some great posts on how to create pitch decks, sales pitches, and just he takes it just to a whole nother level on how to organize your message and get it out there. So I would definitely recommend him.
Okay, brilliant. I actually wrote it down, so I'll do it. I'll do it for sure. So, two-part question here, one last, but from two parts inside of it. Like, where can people find more about what you are doing in Slides Agency, and also what is the best platform for people to connect and just talk with you?
I'm mostly active on LinkedIn, so just look up Damon Nofar there. I don't really have Facebook or any other socials. And on our website, slides.agency, that's the best place. So website and LinkedIn, I would say.
I love the domain, by the way. Slides dot
I was lucky I
the
nailed
dot
that one.
agency part. The dot agency part is super nice. I really love it. Every single time when I just, even today, I was like, let me just copy paste the website in the notes so that we can afterwards link it up, do whatever, put it in the show notes. And I'm like, slides.agency, HTTPS slides.agency. I'm like, that is such a nice domain.
I
That
was
is so
lucky.
nice.
I grabbed it for $20 many years ago. Thank God.
Wow. All right. Well, yeah, that's it. Whatever. So, Damien, thanks for, how can I say, should I say stopping by here, or thanks for joining us here for those 37 minutes already. That was
It's
super
already
nice.
37 minutes. That's great. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me, Boris.
it is already. Absolutely. We're looking forward to seeing you at Present to Succeed 2022 in April. You're going to be talking about, obviously, about slide design. So everyone, if you still don't have your ticket for Present to Succeed, you should definitely check it out and see what Damien and many others will be speaking about. And in the meantime, take a look at Damien's website, slides.agency. You now know. Yeah, go ahead.
It's Damon.
Damon? All right, so let's go with Damon and his agency, which is, again, slides.agency. You now know it. And also his LinkedIn. No matter where you're looking at this one, it will be in the show notes. Either Spotify, YouTube. Thanks again, everyone, for joining and listening or watching, and see you in the next one.